I want to take this conversation to a direction that we don't normally talk about on the show here. I've been doing investigations on this, and I want to present this here. And
Okay.
so, in just last week, we saw this headline: U.S. Congress will hold another UFO hearing. Here's how to watch. So this conversation's been in and out of the mainstream news cycle, and beyond memes and like social media jokes, the public, it seems the public really doesn't know what to make of this conversation. But it's now in the news cycle, and it's now gaining sustained mainstream coverage. So I think it's time to look at it here. And where I want to start this conversation is with Bill and Hillary Clinton. In 1995, they were summoned basically to Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch in Jackson Hole, Wyoming for a week to have a conversation. And at the time, no one knew about that. But in retrospect, we have these headlines here. What really happened when Hillary and Bill Clinton tried to open UFO truths 21 years ago. So this is Lawrence Rockefeller, son of Standard Oil's John D. Rockefeller. And you can see there's an image that came from that meeting, that week-long meeting. And here's Hillary Clinton walking with Lawrence Rockefeller. And she has a book here that's circled. And that book is titled Are We Alone? And it's basically dealing with the philosophical implications of discovery of extraterrestrial life. So kind of a big deal. But after that point, there was really no conversation. And remember, up until that point, media wouldn't touch this conversation with a 10-foot pole. You couldn't get universities to touch any part of this conversation. Governments were quiet at best, but there was a lot of accounts over decades of them covering up situations. And even people who've had any type of experience, they're written off as crazy. All of a sudden, during the 2016 presidential election, we have Hillary Clinton, President Trump. This is obviously at the time was one of the biggest elections in the history of this country to decide the direction. Hillary Clinton takes a turn in the months before the election is over and decides to hang her hat and her campaign on this topic. Take a look.
When we had your husband, President Clinton, on this show, he said, I asked him about UFOs in Area 51 and if he looked in, because if I was president, that's the first thing I do. I go right into those files and see what was going on.
Right.
And he said that he did do that.
Yes.
And that he didn't find anything.
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, why not?
Right? And you know, there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Unexplained aerial phenomenon, really?
Yep, UAP.
Are you going to tell the truth about aliens?
I want to open the files as much as we can. I mean, if there's some huge national security thing and I can't get agreement to open them, I won't. But I do want to open them because I'm interested.
Do you believe?
I don't know. I want to see what the information shows, right? But there are enough stories out there that I don't think everybody is just sitting, in their kitchen making them up. I think that people see things. What they see, I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we've got to try to, give people information. I believe in that.
So this conversation comes out of left field. People are kind of going, what? I thought we were talking about the economy and migration. And so she comes in with this idea in 2016. Obviously, history shows she loses the bid for presidency. But then 2017 comes, and again, she's really the only one talking about this. She loses the bid. 2017 comes. You have the New York Times out of left field. All of a sudden, the media, it's okay to talk about this. Glowing auras and black money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. Remember, for decades, independent organizations thwarted researchers at Ivy League universities. Can't touch this. New York Times comes out and just puts it right in your face. And sure enough, right after that same week, CNN picks it up. So now you have the New York Times, CNN, and Hillary Clinton front-running this idea. Former Pentagon UFO official, we may not be alone. And so this is where we're starting. So we're seeing this and going, wait a minute. In retrospect, now looking at that, these may not be the most trustworthy institutions and individuals to be bringing this idea forward, but here we are. And so all of this momentum at that time leads now into real congressional hearings. And so at that time, we had the first congressional hearing with this subject in like 50 years in 2022, over 50 years. And here's some of the headlines that came out of there. U.S. officials say Pentagon committed to understanding UFO origins. The same Pentagon that censored you is going to tell you about UFOs. Okay, but here's the real switch in the narrative. At that same time, this is what comes out. These are the headlines that come out of that first congressional hearing. Key lawmaker warns at UFO hearing. Unidentified aerial phenomena are a potential national security threat. Goes on to say Democratic Rep. Andre Carson of Indiana, the chairman of the panel holding the hearing, warned in his opening remarks, unidentified aerial phenomenon are a potential national security threat, and they need to be treated that way. They need to be investigated, and any threats they pose need to be mitigated, he said. So this goes on. There's another House Oversight Committee hearing in 2023, a year later. Now things are really rolling at the governmental level. Here's the headline that comes out of that. UFOs present a clear threat to U.S. national security, former military pilots, intelligence officials say. So now you're seeing this narrative form. It's a threat narrative. We don't know what they are. You should be really scared of them. Where Hillary Clinton was saying, I don't know what to believe, but I'd like to know so we can show people what to believe. Well, it looks like the government there with these hearings is trying to tell people, not so subtly, how to believe with this. So at the same time, in 2023, we have this happen. A suspected Chinese spy balloon is found over northern U.S. So that was a day later. You have the DOD, the United States government, has detected and is tracking an altitude surveillance balloon, a high altitude surveillance. That was the Department of Defense. That's their own press release talking about this. So they're tracking that. They shoot that down, and all of a sudden, another one pops up. But what does the media do? Now the media changes its narrative. Just a week later, U.S. shoots down unidentified object flying above Alaska. Now you can see the hyperventilating coming. You see this narrative switch. Here's another headline. Former congressman wonders if object shot down over Alaska is alien UFO. Another one. Canadian search teams hunt for wreckage amid UFO anxiety. So you can see this thing is being whipped up. People, not even the media. It's supposed to be unbiased. It's supposed to report facts. Now it's changed from. It turns out that it was just probably a weather balloon. It was going about 20 miles an hour. It said, and it shot down. So amidst this whole conversation since 2017, you have some figures here. One of them is Chris Mellon of the Mellon banking family, but he's also the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence under Clinton and George Bush. So you have a continuity of government, deep intelligence official. He's handling the whistleblowers when it comes to the UFOs. He's front running the hearings with media appearances as kind of the go-to expert. And he's doing interviews himself on people like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, high-profile interviews. Well, he gets interviewed in 2024 in a Gizmodo article, and he talks about that original New York Times article in 2017 where the world changed. UFOs used to be crazy, but now New York Times and Hillary Clinton and CNN says it's okay to talk about this. That changed the world. Well, what does he say about that? Listen to this. This was not an investigative journalism, Mellon tells me. I handed them the evidence, introduced them to Lou Elizondo, gave them a stack of documents, arranged for them to meet and interview Harry Reid, and made a deal with them. They ran the story, which appeared on December 16th, 2017, on the front page. Well, I mean, that sounds like an intelligence official literally curating information to give to journalists. But there's two journalists in this conversation here. We have Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. They wrote the article in the New York Times. So surely these journalists have something to say on their own. Well, this is Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal themselves talking about that article. Take a listen.
You know, our article in the debrief and our reporting in the New York Times is really focused on the hardware as a first step. And we've been very careful and not to venture too far afield from that because it's even harder to pin down. I mean, you agree, Leslie?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's also, Whitley, it's a matter of strategically bringing out aspects one step at a time and letting people acclimate to something, and then maybe you can go a little farther the next time. So,
Del, I'm a journalist. Acclimate to what? The government's version of this, the intel community's version of this, bring it out slowly so people can. It sounds like gatekeeping a little bit. And Del, I want to believe in the government here, but I have a hard time. With this story. And so, what really happens when you get to the teeth of this thing, all of this hype, all of these congressional hearings, what's coming out the end of the tap here? What do we really have in our hands? Well,
what are we building
when the National Defense? Yeah. When the National Defense Authorization Act was re-upped for 2025, we have, and that is a military budget. We have Chuck Schumer tried to slip in an amendment. And I'm going to read from this amendment that he tried to slip in. And this is one of the provisions. Subsection A, exercise of eminent domain. The federal government shall exercise eminent domain over any and all recovered technologies of unknown origin and biological evidence of non-human intelligence that may be controlled by private persons or entities in the interest of the public good. So the technologies of unknown origin. So the government, if it doesn't know where it came from, they can take it from you. and biological evidence. Could that be people? I mean, what are we talking about here? The government is, what are they? They're saying they own everything if they say they don't know where it comes from. And this is what, so when it's all said and done, this threat and fear narrative being driven it seems like it's working to expand government, give them more power, give them more control on this subject under the guise of we're just trying to get this out for the people. And I'll finish with this. So there's a lot of journalists out there, there's a lot of podcasters that are just being thrown into this conversation and not really understanding what they're being a part of. One of them, one of the biggest voices, perhaps the biggest voice in the world, Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, over the years, has genuinely tried to get to the bottom of this. He's had Chris Mellon on. He's had these whistleblowers on, these intelligence officials on to have conversations and try to get to the bottom of this. And just recently, it seems like the worm is turning for him. Something's changed in his approach with this. Take a listen.
I wanted to spread misinformation or disinformation. If I was an intelligence agent, I think I would get someone to be a whistleblower. I would sanction whistleblowers. I would tell them, go on podcasts, go on radio shows, go on television, and discuss all these different disclosures. And you can't tell them everything. Your top secret stuff, some stuff you got to keep secret. Boy, I wish I could tell you, but there's more I can't tell you. There's a lot going on. And that's a really good way, I would think, if I was in control of a narrative that I wanted to be continuously slippery. Like, this is a very slippery conversation. Like, you never get to the end of it.
Such a great point, and it is really, one of the things you have to imagine, right, that I've worked in television, I've dabbled a little bit now in politics, and you realize that the easiest sensation to use upon masses, when you need to move masses in a direction you want, is fear, right? I mean, it's a lot of how, we watched this election. I would say a lot of the Democratic Party feared Donald Trump. It didn't work, but it comes close, and maybe it's worked before. Sometimes it does, but it really is the easiest way to drive emotion and to get people to perhaps sort of give up their own power. Now, I don't know where this story goes. I've always held that it just seems like when you look out in that universe with all of those being suns, one of them has got to be close enough to a rock that something could grow. But I will say there's certain red flags that go off for me. And I always say this with the audience. When you're watching, as a journalist, you just learn to have certain things that trigger you. What triggers me is when things don't act naturally, when things happen that are outside of the natural pressures that I'm used to watching, which is this UFO story. There haven't been marches on Washington. There aren't, 10,000 people showing up in New Jersey like there were on the vaccine issue. They don't have a leader. I don't know who that would be. You don't see a voice. You don't see it, like really putting pressure on government. You don't see people starting to really stand together and say, we want this information. Just kind of out of nowhere, right after COVID, and that fear didn't quite work as well as you think they might have thought it should. Suddenly, are there UFOs? Headline. Are there, is this something we should be looking at? And now all of a sudden, like photos, that you're looking at and you're like, it could literally be anything. These videos are ridiculous. Like some gray dot moving in space. Come on.
Right.
And so what is the purpose there? One thing is for sure is if you needed a tool and a deadly virus sweeping the world did not achieve what you were looking for, certainly our enemies are in the skies and they're coming for us now, would be a really good way to get us to lock down, I don't know, to shelter in place or whatever else they want to suddenly vaccinate. We've got alien DNA, moving amongst us. It's not beyond our imagination, and certainly, no matter what happens here, I hope that what you're saying, and we should all say right now, is stay skeptical. Stay skeptical of every side of this. I think it's important to just ask yourself, sure, we all have seen enough movies from, E.T. to Aliens and are fascinated by the idea, but let's not be so fascinated that we end up giving up our sovereignty out of some incredible lie or hoax. We've been through it before. It could certainly happen again. It's really an important story, Jeffrey. I'm glad you're bringing this angle to it. And I don't want to let down all those people that watch the show. I don't think we're saying UFOs don't exist. We're just saying if they do, why are they suddenly talking about it now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. Yeah, that's really the basic point of this conversation is we're not coming to a conclusion. We are skeptical, and the players and the organizations that are presenting this to us just don't quite add up
Yeah,
sometimes, and nor does the messaging. So
exactly.
that is where we're at. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this again.
I'm sure. A lot more headlines coming out about that. Jeffrey, great
Yeah.
reporting. And by the way, congratulations, man. I mean, we have stood in this battle for transparency. I know, like you would not be here if you hadn't looked at the mountains of evidence on our side on these issues around vaccine safety, transparency. There really are people being injured. I know that's where we met. We met out there in the field interviewing, both of us from different sides, interviewing families that were just going through this really horrible experience and having a government telling them, and doctors, that didn't happen, it's your imagination. Even though it's written right on the insert, right there on every vaccine are the warnings of these exact issues that are happening to these kids. So here we are. We are now in a moment with a president that didn't just say, I want transparency. He literally just put the king of transparency into a position at Health and Human Services. Now he just needs to get confirmed. So very exciting times.